Sri Lanka, the pearl of the Indian Ocean, faced a tumultuous 2022. The nation, known for its stunning landscapes and vibrant culture, found itself grappling with an unprecedented economic crisis. At the heart of this crisis was a staggering surge in inflation, which reached a peak of 69.8% in September 2022. This marked a dramatic escalation from the relatively modest 5.95% inflation recorded just a year earlier, in 2021. The sharp rise in prices sent shockwaves through the economy, impacting businesses and individuals alike. Essential goods and services became increasingly unaffordable for ordinary Sri Lankans, leading to widespread hardship and social unrest. The inflation crisis quickly spiraled into a broader financial crisis. The Sri Lankan rupee plummeted in value, making imports significantly more expensive. The cost of living soared, pushing many households into poverty. Basic necessities like food, fuel, and medicine were in short supply, leading to long queues and rationing. The situation became so dire that the government declared a state of emergency in August 2022. Schools were shut down, fuel was rationed, and protests erupted across the country, reflecting the growing frustration and desperation among the population. Sri Lanka, once hailed as a development success story, found itself teetering on the brink of economic collapse. The roots of Sri Lanka's economic crisis were complex and multifaceted. A confluence of factors, both internal and external, contributed to the perfect storm that engulfed the nation. One of the primary drivers was a severe balance of payments crisis. Sri Lanka, heavily reliant on imports for essential goods, was facing a dwindling pool of foreign currency reserves. Years of high trade deficits, where imports outweighed exports, had eroded the country's foreign currency buffer. This decline in foreign currency reserves was exacerbated by a series of policy missteps. The government's decision to implement deep tax cuts in 2019, aimed at stimulating the economy, backfired. These cuts resulted in a significant drop in government revenue, widening the budget deficit and putting further pressure on the already strained public finances. Furthermore, a ban on chemical fertilizers, intended to promote organic farming, severely impacted agricultural yields, leading to a decline in agricultural exports and exacerbating the food crisis. The combination of these factors created a vicious cycle, further weakening the Sri Lankan rupee and fueling inflation. As Sri Lanka grappled with its economic woes, the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, emerged as a potential lifeline. In March 2023, after months of negotiations, the IMF approved a $2.9 billion bailout package for the beleaguered nation. This financial assistance came with a set of strict conditions aimed at stabilizing the economy and restoring debt sustainability. The IMF bailout provided much-needed breathing room for Sri Lanka. It helped to shore up the country's dwindling foreign currency reserves and provided the government with the necessary funds to import essential goods, alleviating some of the immediate shortages. Moreover, the IMF's endorsement provided a degree of confidence to international markets, paving the way for Sri Lanka to resume negotiations with its creditors on debt restructuring. This was a critical step towards restoring long-term economic stability. Despite the enormity of the challenges, 2024 has brought with it glimmers of hope for Sri Lanka. The economy, after contracting sharply in 2022, is showing tentative signs of recovery. The World Bank estimates that the economy grew by 5% in the first quarter of 2024, a positive sign that the worst may be over. Several sectors have played a key role in this nascent recovery. Tourism, a mainstay of the Sri Lankan economy, has rebounded strongly. The influx of tourists has provided a much-needed boost to the hospitality industry and generated vital foreign currency earnings. The industrial sector has also shown resilience, with construction and food and beverage manufacturing leading the way. This resurgence in industrial activity can be attributed in part to the government's focus on infrastructure development and the resumption of economic activity following the crisis. Section 5. Navigating the tightrope, monetary and fiscal policy in action. The Sri Lankan government, in tandem with the central bank, has been implementing a series of policy measures to stabilize the economy and tame inflation. These measures have focused on both monetary and fiscal fronts, aiming to address the root causes of the crisis. On the monetary policy front, the central bank has adopted an accommodative stance, cutting interest rates aggressively to stimulate economic activity. The policy rate was lowered by a cumulative 725 basis points between May 2023 and July 2024, making borrowing cheaper and encouraging investment. Additionally, the central bank has been intervening in the foreign exchange market to stabilize the Sri Lankan rupee and curb imported inflation. On the fiscal side, the government has implemented a series of austerity measures to reduce the budget deficit. These measures have included increasing value-added tax rates, removing VAT exemptions, and streamlining government expenditure. The human cost of inflation, poverty, and food insecurity bite. While the economic indicators may be pointing towards a gradual recovery, the social impact of the crisis continues to be felt acutely by ordinary Sri Lankans. The sharp rise in prices and the economic downturn have pushed many into poverty and exacerbated existing inequalities. According to the World Bank, poverty nearly doubled in 2024, reaching 23.4%. Food insecurity remains a pressing concern, with 23.7% of households experiencing food insecurity in 2023. The decline in real wages has eroded purchasing power, making it difficult for many families to afford basic necessities. The crisis has also had a disproportionate impact on vulnerable groups, including women, children, and the elderly, who are more likely to live in poverty and have limited access to social safety nets. A fragile stability. The economic outlook for Sri Lanka. The economic outlook for Sri Lanka remains cautiously optimistic, but significant challenges persist. The World Bank projects that the economy will grow by 4.4% in 2024, a positive sign, but still below pre-crisis levels. Inflation is expected to remain below the central bank's 5% target in 2024, but is projected to rise gradually in the medium term. The country's debt situation remains a major concern. External debt servicing remains suspended pending the outcome of negotiations with creditors. Sri Lanka is seeking to restructure its debt to make it more sustainable, but this process is complex and fraught with uncertainties. Charting a path forward, long-term strategies for growth. As Sri Lanka emerges from the depths of its economic crisis, the focus is shifting towards long-term strategies for sustainable and inclusive growth. The country needs to address the structural weaknesses that made it vulnerable to such a crisis in the first place. One key area of focus is boosting export competitiveness. Sri Lanka needs to diversify its export base and move up the value chain to generate higher export earnings. This will require investments in education and skills development, as well as improvements in infrastructure and the business environment. Another priority is deepening participation in global value chains. Sri Lanka can leverage its strategic location and skilled workforce to attract foreign investment and become a regional hub for manufacturing and services. Lessons from the brink. Sri Lanka's journey towards resilience. Sri Lanka's recent economic crisis has been a stark reminder of the importance of sound macroeconomic management and the need for prudent policymaking. The country's experience highlights the risks associated with high levels of debt, over-reliance on imports, and the potential consequences of policy missteps. As Sri Lanka embarks on its path to recovery, it has an opportunity to learn from its mistakes and build a more resilient economy. This will require a commitment to fiscal discipline, structural reforms, and investments in human capital and infrastructure. By addressing its underlying vulnerabilities and pursuing sound economic policies, Sri Lanka can emerge from this crisis stronger and more prosperous.